We'll make a start because it's 4 minutes past, so I don't want to run too late. For those of you that I don't know, and there's quite a few faces that I don't know, so good afternoon to you all. I'm Jo James. I'm Chief Exec at the Kent Invicta Chamber, and I don't know, I'm either the CEO with the least to do, or I was the one who was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I haven't learned to say no yet compared to my other CEOs. As, I've been leading on a piece of work on behalf of the network, setting up sessions of best practice, and I'm sure some of you have been to those, and we're going to have a whole programme of these throughout the year. There are also other CEOs within the network, 3 others who too are in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they're championing areas of work. And today we're looking at the work being done by the group, which has been led by Russell on looking at a core and shared narrative for the network. So I'll hand over to Russell in a minute, but before I do, if we could just have some housekeeping. You'll know where your own toilets are, and you know where your own kettle is, so we won't go on that one. But just to let you know, we're going to record this session. So if you don't want to be heard, like my dog just barking, you know, please just be aware that it's being recorded. If you have any questions, could I ask you to put them in the chat? And if you could all stay on mute, but please do keep your cameras on because we'd like to see your smiley faces. This is a very interactive session, so please do, you know, ask some questions and get the most out of the session. So that's all from me. I look forward to learning more, the same as you all do. So thank you for leading on this piece of work, Russell. I'm really looking forward to finding out more. So over to you.
Thanks, Jo, and afternoon, everybody. It seems that Jo and I have a shared development requirement, which is learning to say no. So that's one that we can pick up at some point later. So you'll probably, some of you will be aware, as Jo said, last summer on the regular chief executives calls with BCC, after we sort of got through the initial sort of crisis of learning how to manage through COVID, the question was raised as to what the future looks like for our network, and you know what reflections we could take on the changing environment and landscape that we're operating in, and some things that we could do better to make sure that we remain relevant and appropriate as a support organisations across the UK. So this particular work stream, which I failed to say no to leading, was around creating a shared narrative. So some of the background discussion, if we can see the, I don't know if everyone can see the slides. Yep, there we go. So next one, please, Sarah. Right, so here we go. So the background to the piece of work was that we are a pretty complex set of things in chambers of commerce, and you'll all, as communications people, you will all understand the complexities of different varying audiences that we have and different stakeholder groups and the wide range of different things that we do. So how do we simplify and make our messaging more compelling as a network? How do we do that while celebrating our regional independence and diversity, but also making sure that we amplify those shared values and services and messages that we all deliver? I think some of us had reflected on the fact that some people are ill-informed. We think some stakeholders still don't necessarily understand what a contemporary modern chamber of commerce is about. So how do we address that? How do we tackle some of the misperceptions and the barriers that we come across regularly as teams to people joining or working with us? One of the things that kept coming up is a real USP for our network is local, national, global. So how did we articulate that more strongly? How do we become more confident in our tone of voice? And I have a sense that actually, when you reflect on it, nobody can do what chambers do, but we need to tell people that that's the case. So the piece of work that we kind of kicked off in September, if we could have the next slide, please, Sarah, was first of all about understanding exactly what the common elements of the chamber offer is. You know, what's the middle bit of that Venn diagram of chambers of commerce, if you want to put it that way. And so this piece of work was very much based on what we collectively believed that our strengths currently are. Now, some of you might be aware, but there's a separate, one of the other work streams which is currently being developed is doing a piece of stakeholder research that will actually validate some of the assumptions that we are making about ourselves and about the messaging that we're sharing at this point. That may or may not act as a catalyst for changing the way that we operate and possibly the way that we communicate. But for now, I think there's a sense that we're pretty comfortable with what we're about to present to you this afternoon. So we set out to develop a shared suite of key messages that related, we believed, to all chambers of commerce across the UK. We wanted to create an easily accessible toolkit that anyone who was looking to communicate in any way, shape or form with members or prospects or stakeholders could actually go to and pull out words, artwork, graphics, testimonials, which could then be embellished and used as part of your own local communications work. So for example, instead of a chamber saying we have 1,000 members and we facilitated £750 million of exports, plus we also are part of an organisation with 70,000 member companies across the globe facilitating 20 billion of exports. So it becomes local, national, global. One of the things we had to recognise was that of the 53 chambers, some have differing levels of communications and design expertise and resource. And very often we were reinventing the wheel many times over. So hopefully what you see this afternoon will actually save everyone significant amounts of time and resource because a lot of the work has been done. It's about establishing a contemporary profile for our network, spoken more loudly because we're actually sharing our voice and using the same messages in our own marketplaces. So that was the background work that was done initially with the chief executives. And then we thought, but it really is time to bring in the experts. So we asked for volunteers from among the chief executives of putting forward communications professionals from around the network. And so delighted that we had Laura from Aberdeen, we had Phil from Business West, Chris from Coventry and Warwickshire, Jen from East Lancs, Paul from Kent, Alexis from Sheffield, Gemma from Staffordshire, Sarah from Thames Valley. So really, really good team. I think we've had some fun along the way. And those are the guys that you're going to hear from this afternoon. So here we are. That's the background to the piece of work. I'm going to hand over to Phil initially to kick off the main part of the presentation.
Thanks, Russell. Next slide, please, Sarah. So, hi everyone, I'm Phil Bridgman, Head of Membership at Business West. Before the colleagues take us through the resources we've built, how we access them, and the future possibilities of this work stream, we thought it would be useful to share with you the guiding principles that we kept coming back to, that we used as we worked our way through to this point. These principles really helped us stay on brief. So you can see here we have a set of guiding key principles, many of which I know you'll be cognizant of in your chamber. So I'm not going to read through each of them individually. They will be available as part of the toolkit, so you can refer back to them for context. The first 4 statements or principles relate to messaging and comms, so really important. And as a chamber group, I think we need to, as Russell said, deal with some of the misperceptions. We also need to respond to and be ahead of ever increasing expectations from our customers, particularly in the online space. So we do need to have a unique, strong, coherent, modern voice, for example. Our messaging also needs to cut through information overload and also a busy business support landscape. We need to get across how unique our offer is, because it is, and we need to be benefits focused and maybe more regularly centre our members in that messaging. The fifth principle onwards focuses more, I guess, on the project itself and what we needed to build. So as Russell explained, we needed to make sure we agreed on a common set of strong, unique messages that we can each use locally across our different platforms. And that's for the good, really, of the entire network. So the cheesy strapline there is that we are stronger together. And this project isn't a new national campaign like we have seen before, nor is it a replacement of any local existing or planned campaign activity. It's really designed to support your local activity, and you can pick and choose elements. Although I guess there is really scope for a national campaign approach as this work stream is established and developed, and also as we start getting feedback from you. So we do very much welcome and need your feedback. It's your feedback really that will help us make sure this actually is an ongoing project, that we revisit and that we evolve with you as well. So there's absolutely no plans for dusty shelves here. So this really is, these were the guiding principles really that kept us in the right lane. And as Russell said, from September, there followed a number of discussions that were very focused and designed to identify that core narrative and assets for the national collective impact. So before I pass on to Chris, I just thought it might be useful to quickly say that working in this group was great. I think it's a good example of the network coming together. And I witnessed in this group huge amounts of expertise and passion and knowledge, even in this small cross-chamber group. So that's really what the network is made up of, which I think is unique and worth telling everybody about. So I'm going to hand over to Chris.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Phil. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Chris. I'm the Head of Events, Marketing and Comms at the Coventry and Warwickshire Chamber of Commerce here in the Midlands. Great to be with you this afternoon. So I'm just going to take you through the sort of start of where the group came together and began to discuss how we could start to build a toolkit that would fulfil the needs of chambers across the UK. And the starting point really for that was we started to ask ourselves, what do people think they know about us as a Chamber of Commerce, but perhaps isn't correct, or that we get asked all the time, perhaps by prospective members, even existing members, the media, that might not be correct. I'm sure you'll probably agree with me that many times a day, if I could use the facepalm emoji when you get asked a question, you just think that is just not true about what we are as a Chamber of Commerce. But obviously there are those misconceptions and that misunderstanding sometimes. So some of the questions that we pose to ourselves or that we came up with as some of those common misconceptions across the Chamber network are listed on the screen just there, so you can read them for yourself, so I won't read through them. I think many of us will have experienced situations where people have, say, for instance, joined the Coventry and Warwickshire Chamber of Commerce and then can't understand why they perhaps can't then attend a networking event at the Herefordshire and Worcester Chamber or the Black Country Chamber, and so they're confused about that local aspect in terms of how chambers work. They perhaps think we're linked to our local councils or local authorities, or even, as it says at the top there, a government department. They also, I perhaps think, don't necessarily understand the role of the British Chambers of Commerce, and think sometimes, you know, I get asked regularly, well, can we join the British Chambers of Commerce and then have access across the UK? So we worked through a very sort of comprehensive list, and these are just a few of the examples of the misconceptions that we came up with. We worked through a comprehensive list of misconceptions from across all of the members of the working group, and we came up with those ones that really strike a chord right across Chambers of Commerce. One of the other things that we do struggle with, and you may feel this on a local level within your own chamber, is that sometimes we're just seen as networking organisations. Oh, you join the Chamber of Commerce if you just want to do some networking events, and it's frustrating when we offer so much more than just networking. So what we did was we worked through these common misconceptions. We challenged ourselves, in terms of what do people think, what are we hearing as the comms and the marketing and the membership teams on a daily basis in our local business communities as to what people believe what a Chamber of Commerce is and what we stand for. What we did then was we started working through a document of frequently asked questions, which we hoped would pose a question and then be able to answer that question in a way which positions Chambers of Commerce in the right light, would help with help diminish any misconceptions, and also bring new knowledge to our potential customers, but also for those existing customers as well. So that's where we started in terms of sort of looking at this core narrative. So what are the things that people think they know about us but don't necessarily get right? What are those misconceptions that we are out there in the business world that perhaps we could work together? And what are those common areas of misconception that we receive and we experience as a Chamber of Commerce? So as part of the toolkit, and as we go through the presentation today, we'll explain obviously all of the assets and everything that's available within the toolkit that we've developed. But we hope that the frequently asked documents question will support our Chamber colleagues right across the UK to deal with some of those misconceptions and perhaps some of those objections that we receive when people are looking to join their Chamber, or when we're having renewal and membership conversations as well. So hopefully the frequently asked documents will be a useful document for chambers across the UK. And we have, we do understand that, each chamber is designed to best serve its local business community. So we've very much focused on those common threads, those common themes that we as a working group experience across the board. And we've reflected those within the frequently asked documents frequently asked questions document. Just to reiterate as well, Bill's already pointed this out, but the toolkit is designed very much as a working toolkit to be constantly used and referred to. We will be working to update it. It's not a short-term campaign. It's about building this long-term, contemporary and modern narrative for the Chamber network. Following on from putting together the frequently asked questions, we then started to look at our key messages. So I'm going to hand over to Laura, who's going to take us through a set of key messages that we've developed as a working group, which we feel are relevant across the UK network. So over to you, Laura.
Thanks, Chris. Yep, I'm Laura Grant. I'm Head of Marketing and Communications at Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce. It's great to see so many people on the call today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the process and share some of the key messages that you can find on the hub. So we started out with a fairly lengthy list of key messages, and these really covered the full gamut of anything that a Chamber of Commerce could possibly be to anyone at any time, anywhere. But similar to the FAQs and the misperceptions, we wanted to hone them down, make sure that they were common to all chambers, and also that we were feeding into addressing both those misperceptions, but also really playing up our strengths as a network and the areas where we're really unrivaled in many respects. And this has kind of been said before, but I think everyone that's been involved in this project would agree that it was a really positive experience to be part of, because it actually drove home for quite a lot of us just how effective and fantastic we are as a network. Now, I appreciate I shouldn't sound as surprised as I do by that, but it wasn't really until we did this exercise that it hit home just how powerful our offering is. And I hope that you find it equally as illuminating and helpful when it comes to using the messaging to support your own activities. So some of the messages can be seen on screen here. As all good marketing and communications people know, it's not good enough to just chuck your key message out there. You really want to be able to back it up with some evidence. So what we tried to do is marry up each of the brief statements with the facts and the figures that demonstrate that what we're saying is true. We also wanted to focus on the benefits that we as a network bring rather than the services that businesses can get from a chamber. So the tone and the language is very much about how we support companies and help them to succeed rather than just being here's a list of everything that we do. So quite a few of these key messages draw on stats that have been collated nationally. So the top one on this slide is about, how we're independent of government, but feed in at all levels. And as a statement, so what? That's nice. But we've evidenced it by explaining how that independence benefits businesses, and also included some of the tangible examples of that in action using the recent COVID wins information that was shared across the network. This one's been mentioned, that our foundations are local, our influence is national, our reach is global. Again, we've shown our working. So what that means in reality to our members is that, yes, you are joining your local chamber, someone who is based in your community, who understands your local issues, the challenges and the opportunities. But we, and therefore you, the member, are also part of something much bigger and more powerful. So the approach for the messaging was about putting it into context for people, because doing that very visibly sets us apart from the other membership organizations which are out there. Could you click onto the next slide, please, Sarah? So to provide some consistency and really make these messages hit home across the country, we do want to see people using the core messages as we've crafted them. That's the kind of the bits on the left-hand column. But we also recognize that flexibility and regionalization are really important. So you'll see that there's a number of these messages which absolutely allow for and indeed encourage people to tailor them to suit both their specific offering and also their local audience. The bottom two examples on this slide are good examples of that. Not all chambers use Quest, for example. So we've deliberately steered clear of over-prescribing the wording on several of the evidence-based descriptors so that they can be adapted and used across all chambers with the information that resonates best with your local audience. So the full list of key messages sits on the BCC Hub, which you'll get a wee tour of in a minute, but please do go and have a look. This is all about having and using a shared narrative and network-wide messaging to really drive home who we are and what we do. Using these messages is going to benefit all of us. So the ask is that you incorporate them wherever you can, whether that's on your website, in membership booklets, in conversations with members, on social media. There's 100 different ways to get them out there, and how you choose to do that sits entirely with you. Our hope is that you're going to find them you're going to find it quite easy to actually incorporate them into your activities, and that it'll be quite a natural fit. And that what we've done is made your life simpler by pooling this information together into one place. We've also come up with a handful of hashtags, which Jen's going to talk through in a minute. Many of those do work hand in glove with these key messages, but we thought it was important to keep them separate because they also have a wider application than just sitting with these specific messages. So again, we've come at this with flexibility in mind because we, like know how important that is. And that's really it for me. Happy to take questions at the end, and I'll answer them as best I can. In the meantime, Paul is going to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the social assets.
Lovely. Thank you, Laura. For those who don't know me, I'm Paul Brooks here at Kent, and I'm the marketing communications person down here. Now, just before I carry on, I'd need to pre-warn you, around about 2:30, the ice cream van does turn up on my doorstep. So if that happens, please put your ice cream requests in because I'll be gone for 2 minutes. But anyway, back to the presentation. So as kind of already discussed, in terms of those key messages, and I know some people are saying about trying to keep this following through across the network. That's definitely key, because obviously we've done quite a lot of work behind this to make sure that narrative kind of like follows all the way through. As you can see on this slide at the moment, we are looking at, or you're looking at, the kind of stats. So this is kind of the infographics. Now, before I start talking about the infographics and the social media cards, the project team was unanimous that we did not want to take the credit for this. So before I start, Bryony from BCC has been working tirelessly behind the scenes pulling this together. So on behalf of the project team, Bryony, thank you very much for doing this part. I'm just happen to be talking about it. So so what you're looking at the moment is the infographics. Now, we as a team decided that these stats in itself were so powerful to show that kind of like that global and that network that we've already got. So rather than coming up with individual social media cards ourselves, we thought it would be best that we will keep this one slide, which will then allow you guys locally to adapt this how you see fit. We kind of grouped it together into 5 different areas. So you've got kind of like the membership services there in green, the education services more in the pink, the purple being international trade. Then we've got the blue section, which is the communications reach, and then the orangey section, which is the research. And in just a second, I will show you how you can kind of use some of these stats in your own local posts. Now, like I said, these are quite powerful. So how you use them locally will be great, but try and keep to those kind of stats that we've got on here. Now, I believe from time to time, these stats will be updated just to make sure that we stay on top of the current information that goes through as the year goes on. Now, if I can have the next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you very much. So here on the right-hand side, we've got the East Lancashire Chamber had done a kind of like a demo post, just so you can see how some of those kind of infographics and those stats could work locally. So they've just pulled through some information there, and then you can tie that in with some of the information that I know Chris and Laura were talking about earlier. So putting those kind of like infographics in with some of that communication that's already been discussed, already you've got a handful of quite powerful tools to use to promote across the social media channels. Now, we were also aware that what works well in one area might not work so well in another area. And this is almost similar when it comes to infographics. Some chambers use infographics all the time. Other chambers use more of your standard social media cards with your pictures and your icons. So what you're now seeing at the moment on the left-hand side are examples of those social media cards. So you've almost got 3 different types of graphics that you could use. You've got the infographic, you've got the social media cards there on the left that you see at the moment where you've got an actual image, and then you've also got the social media cards there on the right, which is kind of like putting through the icons, which kind of coincides with those infographics as well. Now, we would love you to keep to these kind of templates that Bryony has created on behalf of the network. But as Laura's already mentioned, there are certain key messages that you will want to adapt slightly to fit with your kind of like local messaging. But things like the imagery there on the left-hand side where you've got the ship, you've got the open for business, and you've got like the networking, some of those images you might want to change. So the way Bryony's set that up is that you'll be able to download all of this, and then you'll be able to edit that all yourself, so you can tweak things slightly. There's also an area on those graphic cards where you can put your local chamber logo as well. So so that way you've got the messaging coming out from you guys yourself. Now, all of these assets are going to be put, or they're already on the Knowledge Hub, which Bryony is going to talk to you about in a second. For those of you that might not have your own in-house design team, or you've just not got time, you could potentially just pull these graphics off, grab some of the messaging that's already been discussed and pop it straight out on your social channels. So you could do that straight away. However, when we were talking about this on the project team, we just wanted to make sure you also had the flexibility of tweaking things and adapting things to your own needs. So if that is you and you've got your own in-house team, then you still need to go to the Knowledge Hub to download that information. So you can't edit anything actually in the Knowledge Hub itself. You need to download everything first, and then you've got that flexibility to tweak and change that, adding in your own images and your logos as well. Before I hand over to Bryony, who's going to be talking about the Knowledge Hub, I've seen there's a question that's come up about the presentation itself. All of the information that we're giving you today will be shared after this meeting. So you don't necessarily have to write loads of notes. So the presentation will be shared with you, the recording will be shared with you, and then there'll be the relevant links to the Knowledge Hub and also the LinkedIn group where you'll be able to go for questions, but we'll talk about that right at the end. But that's me now done. So that's the creative side all sorted. And I'm sorry to say the ice cream van didn't turn up. So now I will hand you over to Bryony, who will talk about the Knowledge Hub.
That's great. Thank you very much, Paul. So yeah, hi everyone, I'm Bryony Graham. I'm the Brand and Marketing Manager here at the BCC. I'm doing the operational bit here. I'm actually showing you how you get access to all these assets that the team has been created. What I'm going to try and do is share my screen. Oh, so let's see how I get on with the technology. Okay, great. Can everyone see that? Yeah, excellent.
Yes.
Excellent stuff. So basically, I'm going to take you through the Chamber Knowledge Hub, which is where all this information is stored. There's actually a lot of useful information and resources stored on here for the network. As mentioned earlier, the link's been in the presentation and also on a follow-up email. Everyone has got access to this. Everyone has basically got a chamber-specific login details for this. So, and also a password set up already. So can I ask, if you don't have access to it at the moment, can you just check with a colleague to find out whether you actually do have access to it? Otherwise, I'm happy to reset the password and send you over again. So yeah, just have a check. Once I reset it, can you share with the whole chamber though? Because obviously once I reset it for you, the whole chamber will have to start using the new passwords as well. So once you've logged in, you get to this homepage here. I strongly recommend that you actually save it as either a shortcut, or I've pinned it to my browser here just so I can access it whenever I want to, because it's got a lot of handy information on here, which to be quite honest is handy for you to go back to regularly. I'll take you first of all to where the toolkit is. So it's a Marketing and Press Core Narrative Toolkit. So you can see this is basically where it's all saved. You can see on the left there's a little bit more information about what we've been talking about. On the right, the different assets, all of which are downloadable. So we've got the toolkit introduction, the assets, the social media assets, which Paul talked through, 3 different creative treatments. So you can see here there's an icons only one, which is at the top. There's an images and icons one, and there's an images only. So you can sort of see the bottom here, you've got an image and the icon, and then you've got, this is just the image one, and at the top, just the icon one. And if you click on these will enable you to download them. Currently, there are 3 different versions of each of these 3 creative treatments, one with the Chamber Business messaging, one with Chamber Connect, and one with Chamber Trade. But as has been mentioned earlier, these are completely amendable. They're PowerPoint slides. So you can put in new copy, you can put in new images, and of course add your chamber logo to them as well. So they are very flexible. Underneath the social media assets, we have the editable infographics, which are the little icons we saw. There's a policy wins slide, a network at a glance slide, and then Jen's example use of infographics in a social media post as well there. We've also got the set of hashtags that can be used across the network, which Jen's going to go into more detail after me. The selection of key messages, which we've run through as well. SEO rated content, again, we'll catch you up about that in a few minutes. And then the frequently asked questions document. So you can see all this stuff is saved on this page here. I'm sure most of you actually are relatively familiar with the Chamber Hub, but if not, it might be worth actually spending a few minutes just looking around at all the other things that you can see on here, particularly the Marketing and Press. Obviously, I'm biased here. There's various different assets which you guys could absolutely welcome to take and download. Campaign toolkits, for instance, we've got our Global Annual Conference assets here. Again, loads of downloadable stuff here. So we've got Marketing and Press membership, we've got all the accreditation and benchmarking governance stuff, all very useful. Chamber Customs content on here as well. And then just finally, just going slightly off at a tangent, but network news, which is a really useful way of actually promoting your news and events to the rest of the network. This is the only editable page of the hub in which you can actually upload your own stuff and let the network see what you're doing at the moment. But the narrative toolkit is what we're talking about today. I think that is it from me. So I shall stop sharing my screen and hand it over back to Jen, who's going to be talking about SEO.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. It's probably worth just in addition to saying thank you, just drawing attention, I think, to the fact that those of us who have been in the network for some time had got a little bit tired of the Knowledge Hub. It was a little bit packed with information and a bit difficult to navigate. So we gave it quite a critique. And Bryony, bless her, and I think probably some of the team as well have completely overhauled it. So for those of you who were thinking like I did, oh my God, no, I've got to go on the Knowledge Hub to get to all this wonderful information. It's not what you're thinking. It really isn't. It's been very, very simplified, really cleaned up, and pretty much culled of all information that really, wasn't being acted on and wasn't being used. So massive thank you to Ryan, and it is a really good hub for us all. We talked about different ways to make this information all available, and it just wasn't worth reinventing the wheel. Ultimately we should all be using the Knowledge Hub. So the problem was just with the Knowledge Hub not being cleansed regularly. So that's now been put right. So if you're thinking, God no, please give it a chance and just try and navigate your way around, because you can't really go wrong. In terms of digital, it's probably worth saying that the background work that's gone on within this working group is way deeper than the stuff that you're getting to see probably as the end result. We've literally thought through every word that we've ended up sticking with as key messages. In some cases as a working group, one particular word in a sentence just really didn't do it for our region. So there really is quite a lot of work has gone into this. Digitally, I think it was important that we recognise that while we're all 53, if not more, independent businesses, and we all know the benefits to that, we all know why we're structured in that way. From a digital marketing point of view, that's a real weakness. Ultimately, it means that 53 of us are trying every day to understand digital marketing, update our content, or we're still not trying because we've just not got time or resource or skill set in-house. But ultimately, we are missing out to competitors such as FSB, but there's so many others. Online competitors as well aren't necessarily your business competitors, they're just people who are stealing your traffic. So what we wanted to do was just at least set the ball rolling with what's the right approach to take to that, in terms of us all pulling together and nationally being seen as one organisation from an internet point of view, at least, if nothing else. What I would say is that the language that you see, for those of you who aren't digitally knowledgeable and your background's not in this area, the language that you see, sometimes there's a reason why it doesn't read grammatically correctly, because the internet doesn't work like that. It doesn't work in terms of A-level English, and sometimes it just has to be worded in such a way that Google likes it more than if you worded it properly. So there's a really good reason for everything that you're seeing and the reason why we've done it. Basically, just to touch on the misconceptions that Chris talked us through as well, the FAQs, which are also available in a question and answer format for you to download, they also will all rank on your web pages. What I would say is, by all means, add to them, but the strength comes in not editing them. So if you're going to use the FAQs, please just copy and paste them and pop them on your website. If you want to add your own FAQs or just not use one that's not relevant to you, that's fine. But for every one of us who adds a full stop or starts to tweak a word, it loses that strength of voice that we've got, which basically we cover every corner of the UK and beyond in terms of the internet. So what I would say is, and I came up with this literally while they've all been talking, embed it, don't edit. And you're all muted, so I can't see anybody here, anybody laughing, so that's just fallen really flat. But yeah, any questions? I honestly don't mind if somebody wants to come back and raise things, or if they thought something that we've missed. So from an SEO point of view, what we wanted to do ultimately, if you're somebody like the FSB and you type in into Google a phrase such as business support, chances are the FSB rank nationally for something like that, and would send you to some central page for you to then find your local office. And because we don't work that way, we're literally just missing out on that. It would mean all 53 of us having to do a big SEO campaign to rank for phrases like business support, like chambers of commerce, like funding, you know, all of the key phrases that we want to be right at the top of that search result for on Google. So what we've suggested is we've taken as an example the phrase business support. It is just a starting point. We're not saying by any means that this is it. But ultimately, what we want to try and trial is that if every chamber in the country agrees to take the content that we've written, again, a case of copying, putting your name in and pasting, and puts it onto their website, then over time, nationally, we should start to collectively rank for that phrase. Now, you might think, well, that's all very nice and all very well and good, but why? Why would I? What's the big deal? But actually, the more that we rank for key phrases like this, it's not just all nice to have and fluffy. It's commercially viable. It's a commercial traffic builder that sends people to your website and my website. And ultimately, once they're on that website, we want them to then take some action, book on an event, buy membership, book a training course, whatever it might be. And at the moment, we're not talking about people who already know what a Chamber of Commerce is or already are potentially members. We're talking about people who are that stuck and lost for information that they're typing a phrase into Google in the hope that they'll get some help. So what we want to do is one of us or all of us pop up onto that page in position 1 and take that piece of traffic and hopefully be able to help them with it. The idea being that there's an awful lot more phrases like business support that over time we can add to and add to. But again, the key thing is don't edit it, because ultimately we all need to be ranking for those same phrases. And quite honestly, that piece of long form content that's been written for business support took weeks. So I would be really grateful if you don't edit it and mess about with it, unless you think you can improve it, in which case do it and send it back to us. So yeah, there's literally 6 key points to bear in mind. If you literally don't know what you're doing with this, it's a case of copying and pasting it into a web page and following these key points: how to set your meta description, what to call your page title, etc., etc. And ultimately, number 6 is the key bit that's our ask of you guys, really, is once you've done that, keep an eye on what a difference that makes, because that's the key driver for whether we do this again, and keep thinking about new phrases, new content, and what we all need as a network to rank for. So just picking up on the key asks that we've got of you, by all means do it, crack on. If we all go away from today's meeting and just upload, copy and paste one of the key messages or the SEO piece, or change our hashtags or add a hashtag, that would basically mean that 53 chambers and the whole landscape digitally across the UK changes today in one day, which is pretty impressive if you think about it. The other ask is feedback to us. Please make sure that you're feeding back to us. If this doesn't make the slightest bit of difference to your website, we could do with knowing, we could do with thinking, why is that? And also just pay a bit of attention as to what your competitors are ranking for at the moment. So have you ever, for instance, sat at Google and typed in the phrases that we want to be ranking for? If so, who does rank for them? I tried a few weeks ago and typed in business support and I got gov.uk, and then my local council, the chamber didn't rank for it. We didn't come up there. I think we were on page 3. And quite honestly, who gets to page 3 these days? We've all got not enough time for that. If you're not on page 1, then it's not worth being in the game. So please do get involved, do trial it and monitor and feedback to us. And that's the SEO. If I can have the next slide, please, Sarah. Along the same lines, we also put a lot of work into discussing and picking apart hashtags, which again, they are rankable. If people out there are using and following hashtags, then at the moment they're potentially not finding us. So it's just simply a case of being in it to win it, really. A hashtag, for those of you who don't know, was started by Twitter a few years ago. I'm sure you pretty much know the history of them. LinkedIn now also support hashtags, so you can follow a hashtag, which means that if you want to follow something like Voice of Business, everybody who then posts anything with that hashtag pops up in your newsfeed, whether you're connected with them or following them or not. It's a really powerful way to get things in front of people. What we did was research some of the key hashtags that we thought would work. The bulk of them are either not being sort of claimed at all and therefore have very, very minimal followings, which is great because that means we're starting from a blank slate. And those that are being used primarily by somebody in our network. So they're all relatively safe. And we're not sort of muscling on somebody else's hashtag, which could get messy. The other thing we wanted to do as well was to bear in mind a mix of hashtags with the word chamber in, because that means very, very few of our competitors in the business world and networking world and events world will be able to use that hashtag unless they want to admit the fact that they're using a chamber hashtag, but also a mix of ones that don't have a chamber word in there, with a view to potentially reaching a wider audience. And again, we're just going to keep revisiting these, monitoring them. Like I said, today, most of these have very, very minimal numbers following them. If we can then look back every 6 to 12 months or whatever, as a working group, hopefully with new members on it, hopefully we'd be able to then report back and think, yeah, actually this is huge. You know, we have managed collectively to get X number of thousand people nationally following some of these hashtags. Again, reiterating what some of the team have said, this isn't by any means us saying you have to use these hashtags. Some of them won't be right for your chamber, some of them will. Some of them by all means use alongside hashtags that you already use. So an example is we can't quite often in Lancashire use the hashtag We Are Lancashire. I'm not suggesting for a second that we ditch that in favour of Voice of Business, but what I would do is add some of these to what we already do, just through the sheer, being able to strengthen our reach nationally. It doesn't matter that somebody from Staffordshire might land on my social post. It's irrelevant because all it does is strengthen that chamber brand nationally. And then if they ever were to get in touch because they're that impressed, we'd point them in the direction of the correct chamber anyway. So it's again just coming back to that, almost digitally we need to be seen as one organisation with 53 branches, whilst in real terms we really aren't that at all. So those are the thoughts behind the hashtags as well. And the key thing I think to just finish on really is that all of the work that we've done with I don't know if you'll notice when you go on the Knowledge Hub, hopefully, is that each of these pieces of work link together. So it's really truly joined up marketing for you guys, where the thought was really you need to put very minimal thought in next time you're doing a campaign. The hashtags are also reiterated in the key messages. The key messages, you'll notice the language is used in the answers of the FAQs. Those same pieces of language are used in the long form SEO piece. So, and the infographics again are the stats that you can now have the confidence in, complete confidence that we're all quoting the exact same number, which is, we all believed was what was missing really. And without having to give it much second thought or get things double checked anymore, we can pretty much just say, use this next time you're doing a campaign. By all means, rip it off, copy and paste it. That's exactly what it's there for. There's just not enough of that going on in our network. And also bear in mind sharing that. So we did discuss if you've got something and you've got a campaign or a piece of print or whatever, and you use some of these strategies and tactics, share them with the rest of the network to let us know, look what I did with this. We've started using this hashtag and it's had this effect. You're more than welcome to submit questions and feedback and things via the Knowledge Hub. And we did also say that I think all of the working team are on the LinkedIn group for the marketing people across the network, so you're more than welcome to upload things onto there. Equally, don't be worried if you tried something and it doesn't work, because we could all really learn from that. You know, I'm just as interested if you do a membership recruitment campaign using some of these tactics and it falls flat on its face. We need to know that so that we can tweak it. And I think that's pretty much it from me. There is a space now for Q&A, which I know Gemma is going to look after. Any questions at all, let one of the team know. Yes, sorry, you have just reminded me by changing the slides, Sarah. One of the things that we would like to do, and we kind of need you guys to be on board, so to speak, is we've identified the fact that SEO is a long game, if you like. It's not a quick win. You change your content, you have to wait for Google to notice that that's happened and then start ranking you, and somebody else ranks higher for a day, and blah. You all know the story. What we suggested was potentially trialing a very low budget, short time scale Google ad campaign. But it needs really all of the chambers in the UK to be behind it in order for it to work. This isn't like a business togetherness, just to reiterate. This is us as chamber marketing people saying, these are the keywords I want to rank for. This is my territory that I want to cover. This is the budget that I'm willing to pay for it. But ultimately, it's a national scale campaign. So the strength of it, that if you imagine the scope of that and the reach far and wide, would be really, really impressive and would show us so much learning and so much measurement that we could then look through all the stats and think, actually, you know, annually, this is a really good way for us to run either new member campaigns or to get news out there, or maybe to talk about our awards or whatever it might be. So I know Russell's going to be raising that with some of the chief execs as to putting forward a bit of a trial budget. For those of you who understand Google Ads, it is pay-per-click. So ultimately, the only time you pay is if you actually ended up with somebody on your website, which is a no-brainer, I would have thought. But rather than us all setting up our own Google Ad campaign, which is resource and potentially skill set for those smaller chambers or those without the resource and the skill set in digital, it just means that we'll do it nationally in one go, trial it, feed it back to everybody. And we just believed that kind of felt like that's the bit that was missing. So that will be getting raised. Please, if you're interested and you want to make a lot of noise about it, go to your chief execs literally today now and say, apparently you're going to get asked next week about a Google Ads campaign. I want us to put a few £100s behind this, please, and see what it does for us. In which case, given the example that's in front of you there, we would effectively be at the top of the Google search nationally for business support as a phrase, which I would have thought all of us would like to be. And I think that definitely is me now. So I'll pass you over to Gemma for any questions that you've got for any of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Hello, everybody. I'm Gemma. I'm from Staffordshire Chambers of Commerce. So I've just been monitoring the chat whilst the presentation has been taking place. We've had some great feedback. I think everybody's really on board. And again, just to reiterate, the strength will come from everybody taking this on board and using what we've presented here. So we've only had one question via the chat so far. So just to make you aware, you can ask the question just by unmuting yourself. You can put it in the chat function, and alternatively, if you don't want to ask a question via this live event, you can ask the question via the LinkedIn group, and details of which will be shared after this event by Paul with his follow-up email. So the one question we've had so far is from Eve, and I think, Jen, you're probably best placed to answer this as it's SEO related. So in terms of FAQs, having 50+ duplicate content across URLs, will that not make it potentially damaging to the credibility and rankings of the site when crawled by Google, or is that old news anymore? Is that old news now?
Sorry, is that specific to hashtags?
Eve, do you want to elaborate?
Oh, sorry, no, FAQs. Sorry, I'm just reading back quickly on the question. No, I think the key thing was where we said, by all means, add your own. So ideally, everybody's page content will differ to a degree. However, from a brand voice point of view and fact, and it being credible and factually correct, the point was that all of us are saying the same thing about those key misperceptions, if you like. I know for us, for instance, I've already got about another 10 FAQs that we'll be adding, which, you know, each chamber's got their own little quirks and things that they get asked a lot. I know some chambers, for instance, kind of are part of the local council in some ways, whereas we definitely aren't, but we can constantly get asked if we are. So there will be differences. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that many of us literally just rip off the FAQs, but I think the fact that none of us probably challenge those misperceptions at all digitally, then if we're going to start doing this, is probably the right way to do it, so that at least we're all giving the same answer.
Thank you, Eve. If you've got any other comments, just jump in now. Alternatively, everybody else has got a question, then feel free to unmute yourself.
I've got another question about the FAQs and the links. Sorry, I find SEO really interesting. It's like a magic, really, isn't it? FAQs, if we're not going to all duplicate them, which is great, is there a way of actually linking the chamber websites to one master FAQs on the BCC main website? Because I know that having multiple links backwards and forwards also intrinsically increases SEO rankings with Google, because it looks at quality links back to pages, especially the BCC one, because if there's 50 chambers all linking back to one BCC page, it's seen as like a superior page. Is that still the case? Because that would be great if we could all point back to BCC and push it up the rankings just by putting a link in.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And we talked about the BCC almost leading the way on some of this now that it exists. So the domain authority, you're right, will shoot through the roof ultimately, certainly for the BCC, because we'll all be helping that happen, and therefore we all benefit from it in the long term as well. So I think the idea is that certainly the SEO long form piece that we've written about business support, that's been written in such a way that that can be added to the BCC site. The page, just so that you know, is called What is a Chamber of Commerce? So it's relevant to absolutely everybody, and at the moment it's in a Word document format, so you can literally just download it. But yes, the idea is that and the FAQs and the hashtags also begin being used centrally at BCC by Brian and the team to back up everything that we're doing and sort of tie it together, if you like.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Eve. Does anybody else have a question?
I had a question actually sort of back to the beginning about the shared narrative, really, which was that, you know, whilst I thought it was a good description of what we do, and obviously, you know, different chambers sort of emphasize some areas more than others, I just felt, and I don't know if this plays into any work that's going on around sort of BCC and the sort of, you know, at the BCC level, but I just felt it was a little bit lacking in kind of ambition around the business environment, you know, thinking about things like green growth, sustainability, diversity, you know, about the environment for business. So it was more about sort of positioning rather than sort of practical business support. I thought it very heavily majored on practical business support. So I don't know if you considered that in your thinking.
Thanks, Liz. Well, I think this is the point, is to say it is a starting point, and you know, we do want to get everybody's feedback in terms of where we'll progress this project. Russell, I don't know if you want to jump in at all with this question.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting point, because Liz, because this is the challenge that the group had about not being prescriptive and trying to write something which kind of had a sense of truth for all 53 chambers without limiting other things being added in at a regional level. But I think certainly looking back to the key messages, there's very much, so yes, there's practical business support stuff in there, but I think there's quite a lot of economic development, leadership type of stuff also in there. So I guess it's a case of each chamber sharing the common stuff, the Venn diagram. Everybody could say, yes, that's a commonality, and then actually amplifying and adding to that, using your local messaging. But again, as Gemma just pointed out, there is within the hub, there is a sort of feedback mechanism. So as you start to use this, and as everyone on the call hopefully goes and works out what their login is, has a look around what's there, uses what you like, make suggestions of what's missing or what could be added to, because this is an iterative group. It's very much the start of something, not the end. And as a few of the speakers said, it's not about starting something today that gathers dust forever. The idea is to refresh, to challenge. And although no one can go in and edit the stuff, you can make suggestions of what might be added to the next edit when that's done as a group. So certainly a good starting point, I think. Hopefully your point about green growth, everybody has economic strategies that fit with their regions. I would hope that that would be part of the messaging that you choose to use.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Eve, I believe you've got another question that's just come by the chat.
Yeah, sorry, I'm being a total pain today. In the hashtags, when you add the little apostrophe in the don't, it breaks the hashtag. So it just becomes Don. And I can imagine we don't want everyone following Don.
Yeah,
so
it's just a typo, Eve. You're right, totally right, but ignore the apostrophe.
Okay, that's
Russell's
fine.
holding his hand up for that as we speak.
That's fine,
Yeah,
thank you.
Laura will tell you that I'm afraid I'm a huge pronunciation and grammatical pedant, but the problem is that works when you're writing a piece of prose. It doesn't work for social media, which is far too trendy for likes of me. So I'll let you guys kind of do what needs to happen there. So
yeah, the comment earlier on about please overlook some things in the way they're written was actually aimed at Russell.
Jen, I can't believe you let him anywhere near those hashtags.
I didn't. He's edited them without me knowing. But thank you for flagging it, Eve. Absolutely no grammatic, no punctuation whatsoever in a hashtag.
We'll get that changed in the slides before they're sent out, please. Maybe Sarah, you could do that, and then we can then they'll obviously be on the resources hub without the apostrophe. Thank you. You learn something every day.
Thanks, Eve. Does anybody else have a question? I think we might be okay. So like I've said, if anybody does have a question and they don't want to put it in this group, we will be sending around the details of the LinkedIn group. Again, you can put it in there. All members of the project panel will be in there and will be available to answer any questions. And it's been great to see you all on this presentation. We hope you found it very, very useful. We can't wait to start using the assets, and we hope you're the same too. Again, any feedback that you've got, we'd really like to hear it. It's just the start of the process. We will be taking this forward. It's not going to be the end at all. So thank you so much. I don't know if any of the other panel have got anything to add. No, I think that's it. So thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you soon with the next update. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
And my thanks to the panel as well for all the hard work, and thanks to everyone for listening. Please do use the stuff.